The word struck Sonara like a blade between the ribs. "You will marry Lord Creed in 3 days." Her father didn't look at her when he said it. Aldous Whitmore stood at the window of their modest parlor, his back rigid, his hands clasped behind him, in that posture he always adopted when delivering verdicts he knew to be indefensible. 3 days. 3 days until she belonged to a man she'd met exactly twice, and both times his pale eyes had moved over her body like she was livestock at auction. "Father," her voice came out strangled, "you cannot be serious. The contracts are signed." Still he didn't turn. "Lord Creed has been exceedingly generous. His terms will clear our debts entirely and restore the family's standing. Your mother will have comfort in her final years. Your brother's future will be secured." Secured. As if she were currency. As if 23 years of being his daughter, of managing his household, of quietly sacrificing every dream she'd ever harbored, amounted to nothing more than a transaction. "And what of my future?" The question tore from her before she could stop it. Her father finally turned. His face was gaunt, aged beyond his 50 years by failure and shame. But his eyes, those eyes she'd once thought kind, held nothing but hollow resignation. "Your future is Lord Creed's to determine now. That is the nature of marriage." The parlor door opened behind her, and Sonara's blood turned to ice. She knew who it was before she turned, knew from the heavy footfall, from the way her father's posture shifted from guilty to obsequious, from the sudden charge in the air that made her skin crawl. "Miss Whitmore." Lord Selwyn Creed's voice was cultured and cold, a razor wrapped in silk. "I trust your father has shared our wonderful news." Sonara turned slowly, forcing her expression into neutrality, even as her pulse raced against her throat. He stood in the doorway, immaculately dressed, his dark hair swept back from a face that might have been handsome, if not for the cruelty lurking in every line. He was perhaps 40, old enough to be her father, with the bearing of a man who had never been denied anything he wanted. And he wanted her. She'd felt it during their first meeting, the way his gaze had lingered on the curve of her neck, her waist, places no gentleman should notice. She'd felt it during their second encounter, when his hand had found reasons to touch her arm, her shoulder, the small of her back. Each contact had been technically proper and entirely violating. Lord Creed. She kept her voice steady through sheer force of will. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" He moved into the room with the languid confidence of a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to run. "Surely you noticed my interest. I'm not a man who hides his intentions." No, he wasn't. That was precisely what terrified her. "I had hoped," she said carefully, "for the courtesy of a proper courtship. Time to know one another." "Time?" Creed laughed, a sound without warmth. "My dear, I've known everything I needed to know about you since the moment we met. Spirited, intelligent, beautiful." He stopped before her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and cloying that made her stomach turn. "You'll make an exquisite wife, once you're properly guided." The threat beneath the words was unmistakable. Sonara looked to her father, desperate, pleading. Surely he could see what this man was. Surely some fragment of paternal protection remained in his hollowed-out soul. Aldous Whitmore looked away. "The banns have already been read once," Creed continued, satisfaction oozing from every syllable. "A special license will cover the rest. 3 days, Miss Whitmore. I suggest you use them to prepare yourself for your new life." He reached out and caught a strand of her hair, rubbing it between his fingers, like fabric he was considering purchasing. Sonara held herself perfectly still, refusing to give him the satisfaction of her flinch. "Such lovely hair," he murmured. "I wonder what it will look like spread across my pillow." Revulsion clawed up her throat. I believe, she said, her voice miraculously steady, that we have matters to discuss regarding the ceremony. Father, perhaps you could show Lord Creed the household accounts he requested? It was a desperate gambit, an invented reason to separate them, but Aldous seized upon it with pathetic eagerness, clearly relieved to escape the room where he'd just sold his daughter. Yes, the accounts. This way, my lord. Creed's eyes narrowed slightly, recognizing her maneuver, but he released her hair with a smile that promised retribution. We'll speak more tonight at dinner, Miss Whitmore. Your father has graciously invited me to dine with the family, a chance for us to become better acquainted. He followed Aldous from the parlor, and Sonara waited until his footsteps faded before she let herself breathe. 3 days. 72 hours until she became the property of a man who looked at her like she was something to be broken and remade according to his pleasure. She crossed to the window her father had occupied, staring out at the overgrown garden, the rusted gate, the crumbling stone wall that marked the boundary of their diminished world. Once, the Whitmores had been comfortable, respectable, and secure. Her father's investments had changed all that, each failure compounding the last until they'd lost the main house, the servants, everything but this modest cottage and the pretense of gentility. And now, even she would be lost. Unless she ran. The thought crystallized with sudden clarity. She could flee tonight, after everyone slept. Take what little money she'd hidden, the small inheritance from her grandmother that her father didn't know about. She could reach London, find work as a governess or companion, and disappear into the anonymity of the city before Creed even knew she was gone. It was madness. It was desperate. It was utterly improper. It was the only chance she had. Sonara pressed her palm to the cold glass, watching her breath fog the window, and made her decision. She would smile through dinner. She would play the biddable bride. And tonight, when the house fell silent, she would vanish like smoke. But as she turned from the window, she caught a glimpse of movement in the garden. A figure standing just beyond the gate, half hidden by the shadow of the old oak tree. Watching. Her breath caught. The figure didn't move, didn't approach. Just stood there in the gathering dusk, still as stone, impossible to identify at this distance. Then, as quickly as she'd noticed, the figure melted back into the shadows and was gone. Sonara's chest tightened with sudden dread. Someone had been watching. Someone new. And she had no idea if they were friend or foe. Dinner was a performance of civilized horror. Lord Creed sat at the head of the table, a position that should have belonged to her father, his presence dominating the modest dining room like a wolf lounging in a sheep's pen. He commented on the wine, the inadequacy of the silver, the charming rusticity of the cottage in tones that made clear his contempt. Sonara's mother, Lillian, fluttered nervously, apologizing for things that required no apology, her thin hands trembling as she served the simple courses. Illness had withered her over the past year, stealing the vitality she'd once possessed, and watching her cower before this man made Sonara's blood burn. "Your daughter is remarkably quiet this evening," Creed observed, his pale eyes fixing on Sonara across the candlelit table. "I do hope she isn't feeling unwell." "Merely contemplative, my lord." Sonara offered a smile that cost her everything. A bride has much to consider. "Does she?" He leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. "I would think the considerations fall primarily to the groom. A wife's role is rather simpler. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Whitmore?" Her father murmured something affirmative, not meeting Sonara's eyes. "Obedience," Creed continued, savoring the word. "Compliance. Gratitude." He took a slow sip. "These are the virtues I prize most in a woman. I'm confident Miss Whitmore will demonstrate all of them, given proper encouragement. The threat was naked now, barely concealed beneath drawing-room pleasantries. I endeavor to meet all reasonable expectations, Sonara replied, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. Irritation flickered across Creed's face, or perhaps interest. She couldn't tell which was more dangerous. We shall see. He set down his glass and rose, signaling the meal's end, though half the courses remained. I'll take my leave. Much to arrange before our wedding day. He moved around the table toward Sonara, and she forced herself not to recoil as he took her hand. His lips brushed her knuckles, lingering longer than propriety allowed. When he looked up, his eyes held a promise that made her soul shrivel. 3 days, my dear, and then you'll have a lifetime to prove your virtues. He departed with her father trailing behind to see him out, leaving Sonara alone with her mother in the flickering candlelight. Sonara. Lillian's voice was barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. Did you know? The question emerged harsher than she intended. Did you know what he planned? Her mother's silence was answer enough. How could you let him do this? What choice did I have? Tears slipped down Lillian's hollow cheeks. Your father's debts, my illness, your brother's prospects. Lord Creed offered to resolve everything. And you're so beautiful, so capable. I thought perhaps you could manage him, soften him over time. Soften him? Sonara's laugh was brittle. Mother, did you see how he looked at me? He doesn't want a wife. He wants a possession, something to control and break. You don't know that. Perhaps once you're married, once he's secure in having you. He will never be secure. Sonara gripped the table's edge until her knuckles whitened. Men like that are never satisfied with what they have. They always want more submission, more fear, more proof of their power. Lillian had no response to that, only quiet weeping that filled the room like grief. Sonara softened, moving to kneel beside her mother's chair, taking those fragile hands in her own. I won't let this happen. I'm going to find another way. There is no other way. The contracts are signed, the ban's read. To refuse now would destroy us completely. Then let us be destroyed. The words came fierce and certain. I would rather starve free than feast in his cage. The sound of her father's footsteps in the hallway made them both fall silent. Aldous appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully blank. Lord Creed was pleased with the evening, he announced, as if this were cause for celebration. He's arranged for a modiste to attend you tomorrow, Sonara. You'll need proper gowns for your new station. I need nothing from that man. You need everything from him. Her father's voice hardened. We all do. This marriage isn't merely your future, it's the family's survival. I won't allow your girlish fancies to destroy what remains of our name. Girlish fancies? Sonara rose, trembling with fury. Is self-preservation a fancy now? Is not wanting to be owned by a man who looks at me like meat? Aldous crossed the room in 3 strides and seized her arm, his grip bruising. Sonara gasped, more from shock than pain. Her father had never touched her in anger. You will marry Lord Creed, he hissed. You will be grateful for the opportunity, and you will never speak of this again. Do I make myself clear? She stared into eyes she no longer recognized. Whatever love had once lived there had been devoured by desperation and shame, leaving only the hollow determination of a man who had already sacrificed everything that mattered. Perfectly clear, father. He released her and stepped back, straightening his coat as if the violence had never occurred. Good. The modiste arrives at 10. Be presentable. He left without another word, and Sonara stood frozen in the dining room, her arm throbbing where his fingers had pressed. something fundamental shifting in her chest. She'd been prepared to feel guilty about fleeing, about abandoning her family to face their debts alone. That guilt was ashes now. Later, in her small bedroom, she counted her hidden coins by candlelight. 23 pounds and sixpence, enough for coach fare to London and perhaps a week's modest lodging while she sought employment. It wasn't much, it might not be enough, but it was everything she had, and she would wager it all on freedom. She dressed in her plainest traveling clothes, packed a single small bag, and waited for the house to fall silent. Midnight came. The cottage settled into sleep. Sonara crept down the stairs, avoiding the third step that creaked, and reached the back door with her heartbeat roaring in her ears. Her hand closed on the handle. She turned it, and found Lord Creed standing in the garden, waiting for her. "Going somewhere, my dear?" Terror seized her throat, strangling the scream before it could escape. Creed stood 3 feet from the door, his face pale and terrible in the moonlight, his smile the patient curve of a predator who'd anticipated every move of his prey. "Did you truly think I wouldn't expect this?" He stepped closer, and Sonara stumbled backward into the cottage, her bag falling from nerveless fingers. "Spirited," I said. "I know exactly what that means. It means watching, planning, preventing." "How did you? Your father's servants may be gone, but mine are not." He followed her inside, closing the door behind him with soft finality. "I've had eyes on this house since the moment the contracts were signed. Did you think I'd invest so heavily without protecting my purchase?" Purchase. The word confirmed everything she'd feared. "The wedding is in 3 days," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Surely you can wait." "I find my patience has worn thin." He backed her against the wall of the narrow hallway, his body blocking any escape. "Perhaps a small preview of our wedding night would remind you of your place." His hand rose toward her face, and Sonara's body finally unlocked from its paralysis. She ducked under his arm and ran, not toward the stairs, but toward the front of the house, toward the door, toward anywhere that wasn't here. She made it 3 steps before his hand closed in her hair, yanking her backward with brutal force. Pain exploded across her scalp as she cried out, tears springing involuntarily to her eyes. "Fighting makes it sweeter," he murmured against her ear. "I'd hoped you would fight." The front door crashed open. Creed spun, dragging Sonara with him, and she caught a fragmented glimpse of a tall figure silhouetted against the night sky, broad-shouldered, moving with lethal purpose. "Release her." The voice was deep, commanding, crackling with barely contained violence. "Who the devil are you?" Creed's grip tightened in her hair. "This is a private residence. You have no right." "I have every right." The figure stepped into the dim hallway, and moonlight caught his features. Strong jaw, dark hair, eyes that burned with cold fire. He was younger than Creed, perhaps 30, and he carried himself with the unconscious authority of someone born to power. "I am Corwin Ashworth, Duke of Wintermere, and the woman you're assaulting is under my protection." Duke. The title crashed through Sonara's awareness. A duke, here in her crumbling cottage, confronting Lord Creed like an avenging angel. "Your protection?" Creed laughed, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. "She's my betrothed. I have legal claim. You have a contract signed under duress with a man who had no right to sell his daughter like chattel." The Duke moved closer, and the authority in his bearing made Creed release Sonara's hair and step back. "My investigators obtained copies of the contracts days ago. I've reviewed them thoroughly. They won't survive a challenge in court, and we both know it." Sonara stumbled away from Creed, her scalp burning, her mind reeling. Who was this man? How did he know about the contracts? Why was he here? This is absurd. But Creed's voice wavered. "Miss Whitmore is mine. The bans have been read. The bans can be stopped. The wedding will not occur. Corwin's gaze shifted to Sonara, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. Miss Whitmore, do you wish to marry this man? No. The word came out ragged but fierce. I would rather die. There you have it. The Duke turned back to Creed. She refuses, and unlike her father, I'm not inclined to force her. Creed's face contorted with fury. You cannot simply appear and undo months of negotiation. I have rights, I have claims, You have nothing. Corwin's voice dropped to something quieter and far more dangerous. Leave now, Lord Creed. Leave and never approach Miss Whitmore or her family again. Do this, and I'll allow the matter to end here. Refuse, and I will destroy you. The threat hung in the air, absolute and unequivocal. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Creed's jaw tightened, and he straightened his coat with jerky, furious movements. This isn't over, Wintermere. I don't know what game you're playing, but I will discover it. And when I do, he shot Sonara a look of pure venom. You'll learn what it means to defy me. He pushed past the Duke and disappeared into the night. The sound of a horse's hooves followed moments later, fading into the darkness. Sonara sagged against the wall, trembling violently, unsure if her legs would hold her. Are you injured? The Duke's voice had lost its razor edge, becoming almost gentle. No, I don't think so. She pressed a hand to her aching scalp. Who are you? Why are you here? How did you know? Those are reasonable questions. He didn't move toward her, maintaining a careful distance that she found oddly reassuring. And I'll answer all of them. But not here, and not tonight. Lord Creed will return with reinforcements once he's recovered his pride. You need to leave this house. And go where? I have nothing. No one. You have me. The words were simple, without artifice. I'm offering you sanctuary, Miss Whitmore. My estate, my protection, my resources. You'll be safe there while we determine how to extract you from this nightmare permanently. Sonara stared at him. A stranger, a duke, offering her everything she'd prayed for and never dared expect. It was too perfect, too convenient. There had to be a price. What do you want in return? Approval flickered in his expression, or perhaps recognition. That, he said quietly, is a conversation for the carriage. My coach is waiting beyond the gate. We need to leave. Now. He extended his hand. Sonara looked at it, elegant and steady in the darkness, offering escape from one man and entrance to another's world. She had no reason to trust him. She had every reason to fear what accepting might cost. But behind her lay Creed's promised cage, and before her lay at least the possibility of freedom. She took his hand. The carriage moved through the darkness like a ship cutting through black water. Sonara sat rigid against the velvet seat, acutely aware of the man across from her. The Duke of Wintermere had said nothing since they'd departed, his face half-shadowed, his gaze fixed on the window, as if the passing darkness held answers she couldn't see. She should demand explanations. She should interrogate his motives, challenge his convenient appearance, and refuse to go further until she understood exactly what bargain she'd made. Instead, exhaustion pressed down on her like a physical weight. The terror of Creed's assault, the adrenaline of escape, the impossible strangeness of her circumstances. It had drained everything she had. Sleep if you need to. His voice startled her. We have several hours yet. Wintermere is not close. I couldn't possibly sleep. You're trembling. She looked down at her hands and found he was right. Fine tremors ran through her fingers, aftershocks of fear her body hadn't yet released. That will pass. She folded her hands tightly in her lap. I'm quite well. You're quite stubborn. But there was no criticism in his tone. A useful quality in moderation. Silence fell again. The carriage swayed gently, and despite her protests, Sonara felt her eyelids grow heavy. She fought it, blinking fiercely, unwilling to be vulnerable before this stranger. "I won't harm you." His voice came soft through the darkness. "Whatever you fear from me, you needn't. You have my word. The word of a man I met an hour ago. The word of a man who just saved you from assault. No anger, just quiet statement of fact. I understand your caution, Miss Whitmore. I would think less of you without it. But for tonight, at least, allow yourself to rest. Tomorrow will demand strength you don't currently have." There was something in his voice. Not pity. She couldn't have borne pity. Something closer to understanding. As if he knew precisely what it meant to run on empty. To hold yourself together through will alone. Against every instinct, she believed him. She didn't remember closing her eyes. But when she opened them again, dawn light was streaming through the carriage windows, and the world had transformed. They were passing through gates of wrought iron, massive and elegant, bearing a crest she didn't recognize. Beyond them stretched a drive lined with ancient oaks, their branches forming a cathedral of green overhead. And at the end of that drive, Sonara's breath stopped. Wintermere Hall rose from the morning mist like something from a fever dream. Pale stone glowed gold in the early light, towers and turrets reaching toward the sky, windows glittering like 1,000 watchful eyes. It was enormous. It was beautiful. It was terrifying in its grandeur. "Welcome to Wintermere." The Duke's voice held something she couldn't identify. Pride, perhaps, or warning. "This is your home?" "This is my inheritance, whether it's my home." He didn't finish the thought. "You'll be given rooms in the East Wing. My housekeeper, Mrs. Caddock, will see to your needs. I ask only that you rest today. Tomorrow, we'll discuss your situation properly." The carriage halted before massive doors that opened as if by magic. Servants appeared, liveried and efficient, their faces betraying no surprise at their master arriving at dawn with an unknown woman in tow. Sonara stepped down on unsteady legs, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of everything around her. The entrance hall alone could have swallowed her family's cottage whole. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, portraits of stern-faced ancestors watching from gilded frames. She didn't belong here. The knowledge settled in her bones like cold water. "Miss Whitmore." A woman approached, severe in black silk, her silver hair pulled back in an immaculate arrangement. Her eyes were sharp and assessing, missing nothing. "I am Mrs. Caddock, if you'll follow me." Sonara glanced back at the Duke, but he was already disappearing down a corridor, his footsteps echoing against the marble. No farewell. No reassurance. Just absence. Mrs. Caddock led her up a sweeping staircase, through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, until finally they reached a set of double doors that opened onto impossible luxury. The rooms were beautiful, though something about them felt preserved rather than lived in. A sitting area with velvet furniture, a bedroom with a 4-poster bed draped in silk, a vanity with a silver mirror that seemed meant for someone else. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases. A fire crackled in the hearth, despite the mild weather. "Breakfast will be brought shortly," Mrs. Caddock said. "A bath is being drawn. Is there anything else you require?" Sonara turned slowly, taking in the splendor. "I require an explanation. Why am I here? What does the Duke want from me?" The housekeeper's expression wavered, something almost like sympathy crossing those severe features. "Those are questions for His Grace to answer, miss. My role is simply to ensure your comfort. Am I a guest or a prisoner? You are whatever you choose to be." Mrs. Caddock moved toward the door, then paused. "A word of advice, Miss Whitmore. Wintermere holds many secrets. Some are better left undiscovered. She departed before Sonara could respond. Alone in the beautiful room, surrounded by luxury she'd never imagined, Sonara sank onto the edge of the bed and finally let herself feel the full weight of her circumstances. She had escaped one cage, but what had she stumbled into instead? Sonara slept through most of the day, her body demanding rest her mind would have denied it. When she finally woke, late afternoon light slanted through the windows, and a tray of food sat cooling on the table by the fire. She ate mechanically, barely tasting the delicate sandwiches and fruit, her thoughts churning with questions she had no way to answer. A soft knock interrupted her brooding. Miss Whitmore. A young maid entered, perhaps 17, with copper hair and kind eyes. "I'm Bryony. Mrs. Caddock assigned me to attend you. Is there anything you need?" "Information," Sonara said, "about the Duke, about why I'm here." Bryony's expression shuddered slightly. "I couldn't say, miss. His Grace keeps his own counsel. But there must be talk among the servants. Speculation." The maid hesitated, clearly torn between discretion and something that looked almost like concern. "There's always talk, miss, but I've only been here 6 months myself. I don't know what's true and what's gossip." "Tell me the gossip, then." Bryony glanced toward the door as if checking for eavesdroppers. "They say His Grace changed after his brother died. 2 years ago it was. Lord Marcus. There was an accident, a fire at the hunting lodge. His Grace survived. His brother didn't. A dead brother. Survivor's guilt. It didn't explain why he'd appeared at her cottage like a guardian angel, but it painted edges of a picture she couldn't yet see whole. What else? They say he blames himself, that he's been searching for something ever since, some way to make amends." Bryony shook her head. "But I don't know for what. And miss, I really shouldn't be telling you any of this. If Mrs. Caddock found out—" "I won't betray your confidence." The maid's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Is there anything practical I can help with? A bath, perhaps? Fresh clothes? His Grace had gowns sent up from London last month. They're meant for a guest, though no one knew who. I suppose that guest is you." Sonara's skin prickled. Gowns sent a month ago? For a guest whose identity no one knew, which meant he'd planned this. Planned her rescue, her arrival, her presence in his house, weeks before he'd ever appeared in her garden. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it raised the hairs on her neck. A bath would be welcome, she managed, and one of the simpler gowns, if there's such a thing. An hour later, scrubbed clean and dressed in a dove-gray silk that fit her perfectly, which raised its own disturbing questions, Sonara felt almost human again. Bryony had arranged her dark hair simply but elegantly, and the mirror reflected someone she barely recognized, someone who might actually belong in a place like this. "His Grace requests your presence in the drawing room," Bryony announced, "if you're ready." No, she wasn't ready, but she would go anyway. The drawing room was smaller than the cavernous spaces she'd glimpsed earlier, warmer, more intimate. A fire burned low in the grate, and evening light filtered through tall windows, casting everything in amber. The Duke stood by the fireplace, still in the dark clothes he'd worn the night before. He looked tired, she realized. Lines of exhaustion carved grooves around his eyes, and something in his posture suggested a man carrying weights invisible to others. "Miss Whitmore, please sit." She chose a chair rather than the settee, maintaining distance. "You promised me answers, Your Grace." "I did." He didn't sit himself, remaining standing with one hand braced on the mantel. "And I'll give them, though I suspect you won't like all of what you hear. I'll like it better than ignorance." Approval warmed his expression. "Very well. I knew your father, Miss Whitmore. Years ago, before his failures. He was a business associate of my late brother's, though that association ended poorly. Her stomach tightened. Ended how? Your father made certain promises he couldn't keep. My brother lost money because of it. Considerable money. Corwin's voice remained level. But that's not why I intervened in your situation. I intervened because Lord Creed is a monster, and I have personal reasons for wanting to see him destroyed. The accusation struck her like a physical blow. What reasons? His first wife was my cousin. Corwin's jaw tightened. Morvenna was gentle and kind, and utterly unprepared for what he was. She died 3 years into their marriage. The official cause was consumption. The truth was systematic cruelty that broke her body and spirit until there was nothing left to save. Sonara's blood ran cold. You believe he killed her? I know he did, but I couldn't prove it, and he was careful, so careful, to maintain appearances. Corwin finally moved, crossing to a chair across from her, but not sitting. When I learned he'd set his sights on you, I saw an opportunity to save someone he would have destroyed, and to finally bring him to justice. I'm bait then, a pawn in your revenge. You're a human being who deserved rescue regardless of my motives. His voice sharpened. But yes, your presence here serves multiple purposes. I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. She should be angry. She was angry. But beneath the anger ran something more complicated. A strange respect for his honesty, his refusal to dress his schemes in pretty lies. What exactly do you expect from me? Before he could answer, the drawing room door burst open. A woman swept in, silver-haired and imperious, dressed in mourning black that somehow conveyed rage rather than grief. Her eyes, the same striking gray as the Duke's, locked onto Sonara with immediate hostility. So, this is her. The woman's voice dripped contempt. The tradesman's daughter you've installed in Morvenna's rooms. Corwin straightened. Grandmother, don't. The single word cracked like a whip. I warned you, Corwin. I warned you about your obsessions, your crusades, and your endless guilt. And now you bring this nobody into our home, parade her in gowns that cost more than her family's worth. All for what? Revenge that won't bring Marcus back? Justice that won't resurrect Morvenna? She turned her terrible gaze back to Sonara. You. Do you know what you are? A tool. A weapon he'll use until you're dull, then discard. My grandson doesn't feel, Miss Whitmore. Not anymore. Whatever you think you see in him, it's ice pretending to be flesh. Sonara rose to her feet, trembling but refusing to cower. With respect, Your Grace, I've already been used as a tool by men who saw me as property. If the Duke's honest about his purposes, that's more than my own father offered. I'll take clear-eyed utility over loving betrayal any day. Silence rang through the room. The Dowager stared at her, a flicker of movement behind those cold gray eyes. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its venom. You have spine, girl. That's something, at least. She turned to Corwin. Don't destroy her the way you destroyed yourself. That's all I ask. She swept out as dramatically as she'd arrived, and Sonara was left wondering exactly what manner of broken man she'd entrusted with her life. The days that followed settled into unexpected rhythm. Sonara was given freedom of the house and grounds, with the unspoken understanding that she wouldn't attempt to leave. Not that she had anywhere to go. Lord Creed would be watching the roads, and her father had made his loyalties clear. So she explored instead, lost herself in the endless corridors, the galleries filled with art she'd only seen in books, the library that contained more volumes than she could read in 10 lifetimes. It was there that she kept finding the Duke. The first time seemed coincidental. She'd entered seeking something to occupy her restless mind, and there he was, sitting by the window with a book open in his lap, though his eyes were fixed on nothing. "Forgive me." She'd started to retreat. "I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not intruding." He'd gestured to the shelves around them. "This room exists to be used. Take what you like." She'd selected a volume at random and settled in a chair far from his, intensely aware of his presence, despite the distance between them. They'd read in silence for an hour before he excused himself and left. The second time, she found him there again. Same chair, same unseeing stare. This time, she didn't apologize for entering, simply chose her book and took her seat. But this time, he spoke. "Do you play chess?" The question surprised her. "Passably. My brother taught me." "Would you care for a game?" So they played. He won easily, but his attention seemed genuinely engaged for the first time since she'd met him. When she managed a particularly clever move, something almost like a smile touched his mouth. "You undersell your abilities, Miss Whitmore. I find it's useful for men to underestimate me." That earned her a look of genuine interest. "Does that happen often?" "Constantly." She captured one of his knights. "Though less often since I stopped trying to make them comfortable." He studied the board, but she sensed he was really studying her. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone more diminished by circumstance." He moved his bishop. "Your family's decline, your father's betrayal, Creed's assault. Most would be broken by now. Breaking is a luxury I can't afford." She considered her options, then moved her queen. "Besides, anger is an excellent substitute for strength. I have plenty of anger." "Directed at whom?" "Everyone who assumed I'd be easy to control." She met his eyes. "Including you, Your Grace." The smile returned, fuller this time. "Noted." By the third day, their chess games had become ritual. Morning in the library, an hour of moves and conversation that revealed more than either of them intended. She learned that he'd been close to his brother Marcus, that the fire had been ruled an accident, but he'd never believed it. She learned that his grandmother, Lady Thessaly, had raised him after his parents died when he was young, and that her harshness was armor forged from too much loss. She learned that he slept poorly, ate rarely, and drove himself with relentless purpose toward goals he refused to fully explain. In turn, she told him about her mother's illness, her brother Jonathan's absence abroad, fled to escape debts and bad associations he refused to name, the slow suffocation of watching her family crumble while being unable to stop it. She told him about the dreams she'd had to abandon, the governess position she'd been pursuing before Creed had entered the picture, the books she'd read as escape when reality became unbearable. He listened, really listened, not with the performative attention of men waiting for their turn to speak, but with the focused intensity of someone cataloging every word. It was unsettling and unexpectedly warming. On the fourth evening, she found him not in the library, but in the portrait gallery, standing before a painting of a young woman with copper hair and sad eyes. "Morvenna," he said without turning. "Before Creed." Sonara stood beside him, studying the face of his dead cousin. Beautiful, yes, but fragile in a way that made her heart ache. A woman made of glass in a world full of hammers. She was kind, Corwin continued quietly. So terribly, fatally kind. She believed people were good because she was good. She married Creed because he was charming and attentive, and she couldn't imagine anyone hiding something monstrous beneath a pleasant face. "You tried to warn her?" I was 22 and arrogant and certain she'd see through him eventually. His voice roughened. She didn't. She just kept believing, kept hoping, kept making excuses, until there was nothing left of her to save. Sonara's hand moved before she could stop it, resting briefly on his arm. The touch was meant to comfort, nothing more. But he went utterly still beneath her fingers. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For her. For you." He turned, and for a moment, the ice his grandmother had described cracked. She saw something raw beneath, something wounded and wanting and desperately alive. Then the mask slid back into place. "Thank you." His voice was controlled again. "I should let you rest. Tomorrow will be eventful." Eventful how? He was already moving toward the door. "Lord Creed has requested a formal meeting. He's coming here, to Wintermere." The words landed like a blow. "And you're going to let him?" Corwin paused in the doorway, and when he looked back, something dangerous burned in his eyes. "I'm going to end him, Miss Whitmore. Once and for all." He disappeared into the shadows, and Sonara was left with the painted eyes of a dead woman, wondering if she was about to become another casualty of Lord Creed's cruelty or witness to his downfall. Lord Creed arrived at noon, his carriage rolling up the drive with the pomp of a conquering general. Sonara watched from her window, her nails digging crescents into her palms. She dressed carefully, choosing a gown of deep burgundy that Bryony said brought out the fire in her eyes. If she was going to face the man who'd nearly destroyed her, she would do it armored in silk and steel. "Miss Whitmore," Corwin's voice came from her doorway. "It's time." She turned to find him dressed in formal black, every inch the powerful Duke. But his eyes, when they met hers, held something that looked almost like concern. "Are you ready?" "No." She lifted her chin. "But I'm going anyway." Warmth crept into his expression. "Good. Remember, you're not alone in this. Whatever happens down there, I'm with you." The words settled into her chest like an ember, warming places she'd thought frozen solid. They descended together, his hand briefly touching the small of her back as they reached the main staircase. The contact was proper, barely there, yet she felt it reverberate through her entire body. Lord Creed waited in the formal drawing room, standing before the fireplace as if he owned it. His pale eyes tracked their entrance with predatory attention, lingering on Sonara in a way that made her skin crawl. "Miss Whitmore." His voice was silk over poison. "You look remarkably well for a woman who fled her obligations like a common thief in the night." "I fled assault, my lord, a distinction you seem eager to ignore." "Assault?" His laugh was hollow. "A lover's enthusiasm, nothing more. Surely you didn't take it so seriously." "I took your hands on me very seriously indeed." Sonara's voice didn't waver. As did the Duke when he removed them. Creed's jaw tightened, but he maintained his pleasant mask. "Ah yes, the noble rescuer. Tell me, Wintermere, what exactly is your interest in my betrothed, besides the obvious, of course?" "She is not your betrothed." Corwin moved to stand beside Sonara, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "The contracts were signed under duress, and are therefore void. Miss Whitmore has refused you. The matter is concluded." "Is it?" Creed produced a sheaf of papers from his coat. "I've had my solicitors review the situation. The contracts are entirely legal, signed by her father, who had full authority to arrange her marriage. Her refusal is irrelevant. Regrettable, perhaps, but irrelevant." "Then we'll challenge them in court." "By all means." Creed's smile was razor-sharp. "A lengthy public battle that will destroy whatever remains of the Whitmore family's reputation." Miss Whitmore's name dragged through every scandal sheet in London, her mother's final months consumed by shame and stress. He spread his hands. "Is that what you want for her, Wintermere? All because you couldn't bear to let me have something you wanted?" The accusation charged the air like lightning. "I want nothing," Corwin said coldly, "except to see you exposed for what you are." "And what am I?" "A murderer." The word cracked through the room like thunder. Creed's pleasant expression wavered, something dark sliding beneath the surface. Careful, Your Grace. Accusations like that can have consequences. So can actions like yours? Corwin stepped forward, his voice dropping to something quiet and deadly. I know what you did to Morvenna. I know how she really died. And I will prove it, Creed, if it takes me the rest of my life. For a moment, genuine fury twisted Creed's features. Then the mask returned, smoother than before. Your cousin was weak, fragile. She couldn't handle the realities of marriage to a man of substance. His gaze slid to Sonara. Miss Whitmore is made of sterner stuff. I look forward to testing exactly how stern. Before Sonara could respond, the drawing room doors opened. Lady Thessaly swept in, magnificent in black silk, her presence commanding immediate attention. Lord Creed. Her voice could have frozen hellfire. I understand you've come to make claims on a guest of this house. Lady Thessaly. Creed bowed with exaggerated courtesy. I've come to collect my property. Property. The dowager's eyes narrowed. Is that how you view young women? As objects to be collected? I view Miss Whitmore as my contracted bride. Nothing more, nothing less. Then you view her incorrectly. Lady Thessaly moved to stand beside Sonara, forming a unified front with her grandson. Miss Whitmore is under the protection of the Ashworth family. Any attempt to remove her from this house will be met with the full force of our name, our resources, and our connections. Sonara's throat tightened. The woman who'd called her a nobody was now standing as her defender. Creed's composure cracked further. You can't simply steal another man's bride because you've decided you want her for yourself, Wintermere. There are laws, customs, expectations. There is also justice. Corwin's voice was steel. Something you've evaded for far too long. Leave now, Creed, while you still can. Or what? You'll have me thrown out? Creed laughed. The scandal would be delicious. The Duke of Wintermere, so desperate for a tradesman's daughter that he assaults her legal betrothed. The Duke of Wintermere, Corwin said quietly, has evidence, witnesses, documents. Everything needed to prove what you did to my cousin and how you've treated every woman unfortunate enough to fall into your hands. The color drained from Creed's face. You're bluffing. Try me. Silence stretched between them, deadly and electric. Sonara could see the calculation happening behind Creed's pale eyes, the weighing of risks and rewards. Finally, he smiled. But it was a different smile now. Colder, more dangerous. Very well. Keep her. For now. He straightened his coat. But understand this, Wintermere. I don't lose. Not ever. And I certainly don't lose to a man drowning in guilt over a brother he couldn't save. Corwin went utterly still. Oh, yes. Creed's voice dripped satisfaction. I know all about Marcus, about the fire, about what really happened that night. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper meant to wound. Does she know? Your little rescue? Does she know what kind of man she's trusting with her life? He swept from the room before anyone could respond, his departure leaving devastation in its wake. Sonara turned to Corwin, her heart seizing in her chest. His face had gone pale, his hands clenched at his sides, something shattered lurking behind his eyes. Corwin. Not now. His voice was rough, barely controlled. Please, not now. He left the room in the opposite direction from Creed, his footsteps echoing like a funeral march. Lady Thessaly sighed heavily. The man knows precisely where to strike. Always has. What did he mean? Sonara demanded. About Marcus. About what really happened. The dowager studied her for a long moment. That's my grandson's story to tell, if he chooses to tell it. She moved toward the door, then paused. But Miss Whitmore, he didn't kill his brother. Whatever guilt he carries, it isn't that. Remember it when the truth comes out." She departed, leaving Sonara alone with questions multiplying like shadows. What had happened to Marcus, and what secret was Corwin carrying that Creed could use as a weapon? She found him at midnight, in the ruins of the old hunting lodge. Bryony had told her where to look, reluctantly, after Sonara had spent hours searching the house. The lodge was a mile from the main estate, half collapsed and blackened by fire. Even in moonlight, she could see the devastation. This was where Marcus had died. Corwin sat on a fallen beam, his back to her, staring at the charred remains of walls that had once held warmth and life. He didn't turn when she approached, though she knew he heard her. "You shouldn't be out here." His voice was hollow. "It's not safe. Neither is leaving you alone with whatever Creed stirred up." She settled beside him on the beam, close enough to touch, but not touching. The night was cool, the air sharp with the lingering smell of old smoke. "You don't have to tell me," she said quietly. "But if you want to, I'll listen." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, slowly, the words began to fall. "We came here that weekend to hunt, Marcus and I, just the two of us, like we did every autumn." Corwin's voice was distant, reciting facts he'd clearly told himself 1,000 times. "The fire started in the kitchen. An accident, they said. A lantern knocked over, flames spreading too fast to control. But you don't believe that." "I know it wasn't true." His hands clenched on his knees. "Because I saw someone leaving the lodge just before it started, a figure in the dark, moving toward the woods. I was coming back from checking the horses. I saw them, but I didn't realize." The anguish in his voice made her chest ache. By the time the flames were visible, the whole kitchen wing was engulfed. Marcus's room was directly above. I tried to get to him, tried to break through the fire, but it was too hot, too fast. He drew a ragged breath. I heard him screaming, calling my name, and I couldn't reach him. Sonara's eyes burned with unshed tears. "Corwin, I was pulled out by servants. They held me back while the lodge collapsed, while my brother burned." His voice cracked on the final word. "And I never found out who started it, never proved it was deliberate. The magistrate ruled it an accident, and that was that. You think Creed was involved? I know he was." The certainty in his voice was absolute. Marcus had evidence against him. Documents proving Creed had been systematically defrauding his business partners, including connections to Morvenna's death. He was going to expose everything. And then, conveniently, he died. And the evidence? Burned with him. Corwin finally turned to look at her, and the devastation in his eyes stole her breath. "Do you understand now? Why I'm obsessed with destroying him? It's not just about Morvenna. It's about Marcus. It's about everyone Creed has hurt, while the world looked the other way, because he's wealthy and titled and charming. I understand." She reached out, covering his hand with hers. "I understand completely." He stared at their joined hands, as if the contact were something miraculous and terrible. "Creed will use this against me, against us. He'll twist it, make it seem like I'm unstable, grief-mad, pursuing vendetta rather than justice." His fingers slowly turned beneath hers, intertwining. "He'll try to make you doubt me." "He can try." Sonara squeezed his hand. "But I've seen monsters, Corwin. I know what they look like, and you're not one." "How can you be certain?" "Because a monster wouldn't sit in the ashes of his guilt for 2 years, punishing himself for something that wasn't his fault." She shifted closer, holding his gaze. "Because a monster wouldn't risk everything to save a stranger from a fate he couldn't save his cousin from. Because a monster wouldn't look at me the way you do, like I'm something precious instead of something to possess." His breath caught. How do I look at you? Like you're afraid to hope. The words hung between them, honest and raw. I am afraid, he admitted, of wanting something again, of caring about someone who might be taken away. I'm afraid, too. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Of trusting someone who has power over me, of being used and discarded, of believing in something that might be another cage in disguise. This isn't a cage, Sonara. I swear it. I'm starting to believe that. He lifted their joined hands, pressing his lips to her knuckles in a gesture so tender it made her heart stutter. Stay, he said. Not because you have nowhere else to go. Not because Creed is hunting you. Stay because you want to. Because this, whatever this is between us, might be worth the fear. She should hesitate. Should calculate the risks, weigh the dangers, protect herself the way she'd learned to do. Instead, she leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body against the cool night air. I'll stay. His arm came around her, pulling her closer, and they sat together in the ruins of his grief while the moon tracked its silver path across the sky. For the first time in years, Sonara felt something she'd forgotten was possible. She felt safe. 3 days passed like a dream. They rode together through the estate's sprawling grounds, Corwin showing her the hidden places he'd loved as a boy. The waterfall, where he'd learned to swim. The ancient oak, where he and Marcus had built a treehouse that still clung to the branches, rotting but resilient. The hilltop where you could see 3 counties on a clear day. They talked endlessly, about books and philosophy, about politics and poetry, about the people they'd been before loss had reshaped them. She told him about the governess position she'd wanted, the family she'd hoped to teach, the life of quiet independence she'd been building before Creed had shattered it. You could still have that life, he said one afternoon, as they walked through the rose garden. When this is over, I could arrange introductions, references. The best families would be fortunate to have you. Is that what you want? She stopped walking, turning to face him. For me to become a governess and leave? His expression wavered. I want you to have choices. Real ones. Not obligations born from circumstance. That's not an answer. No. His voice roughened. It isn't. They stood among the roses, sunlight warm on their faces, something electric building in the air between them. What do you want, Corwin? She stepped closer. Not for me. For yourself. I want. He swallowed hard, his eyes dropping to her lips before jerking back up. I want things I have no right to want. Things that would complicate everything. Things that terrify me. Like what? He didn't answer with words. His hand came up, cupping her face with a tenderness that made her tremble. His thumb traced along her cheekbone, feather light, reverent. Like this, he murmured, like touching you and never wanting to stop. Her breath caught. Corwin. Tell me no. His voice was strained. Tell me this is too fast, too dangerous, too complicated. Tell me and I'll step back. I'll be proper and distant, and I'll pretend I don't think about you every moment you're not in front of me. What if I don't want you to step back? The last restraint behind his eyes shattered. He kissed her. Not gently. Not carefully. He kissed her like a man drowning, like she was air and salvation, and everything he'd forbidden himself to need. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and she went willingly, eagerly, her fingers gripping the lapels of his coat. She tasted desperation on his lips, hope and fear and something wild that matched the pounding of her own heart. When they finally broke apart, gasping, his forehead pressed against hers. That was inevitable. She laughed, breathless. I think that was inevitable from the moment you appeared in my garden, like some avenging angel. I'm no angel. But he was smiling, really smiling, in a way she'd never seen. Angels don't have thoughts like I've been having about you. Heat flooded her cheeks. What kind of thoughts? Improper ones, extensive ones. He kissed her again, softer this time. Thoughts that would scandalize my grandmother and probably get me challenged to a duel by someone with more propriety than sense. I don't care about propriety. I know. He pulled back, his expression growing serious. But we should care about timing. Creed is still out there, still plotting. Until he's dealt with, anything between us puts you at greater risk. I'm already at risk. Greater risk, he repeated. If he realizes how I feel about you, he'll use it. He'll find a way to hurt me through you. She cupped his face in her hands, mirroring his earlier gesture. Then we'll be careful. We'll be clever. But don't ask me to pretend this doesn't exist, Corwin. I've spent my whole life pretending. I'm done with it. I wouldn't ask that. He turned his head, pressing a kiss into her palm. I just need you to understand what you're choosing. This isn't a fairy tale. The ending isn't guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed, she smiled. But this feels worth the risk. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, and for a long moment they simply stood together in the rose garden, breathing each other in. We'll find a way, he said against her hair, to stop Creed, to build something real. I promise. I believe you. And she did. Against all reason, against every lesson life had taught her about trusting powerful men, she believed him, which made what happened next so much worse. The footman found them an hour later, his face pale with urgency. Your Grace, a messenger has come from the village. What message? The footman swallowed. Miss Whitmore's mother, sir. She's taken a turn for the worse. The physicians say she may not last the week. The world tilted sideways. Mother, Sonara whispered. No, I have to go to her. I have to. Of course. Corwin gripped her hands. We'll leave immediately. I'll have the carriage prepared. Your Grace, the footman's voice was strained. There's more. The messenger says, Lord Creed has been seen in the village, near the Whitmore cottage. He's waiting for her. Dread coiled tight in Sonara's chest. Creed had found her vulnerability, and he was using her dying mother as bait. They argued for an hour. Corwin wanted to send physicians, servants, protection. He wanted to bring Lillian to Wintermere, where she could be properly cared for. He wanted to do anything except let Sonara walk into Creed's trap. He's counting on this, Corwin insisted, pacing the library like a caged wolf. He knows you'll come. That's why he's waiting. And if I don't come? If I stay here while my mother dies alone? Sonara's voice cracked. What kind of daughter does that? What kind of person? The kind who survives. The kind who doesn't hand victory to a monster. She's my mother. The words came out broken. She's all I have left of who I was before all this. I can't let her die thinking I abandoned her. Corwin stopped pacing. The anguish in his expression mirrored her own. Then I'll come with you. And give Creed exactly what he wants. Both of us, away from Wintermere, vulnerable. She shook her head. If you're with me, he'll have leverage over you too. I need to go alone. Absolutely not. Corwin. I said no. He crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. I let someone I loved face danger alone once. I'm not doing it again. The word echoed between them. Loved. You don't have to say it back, he added quickly. I know this is new. I know we haven't had time to. I love you too. The confession escaped before she could stop it. True and terrifying and utterly undeniable. His grip on her shoulders gentled. Then trust me. We go together. We bring guards. We don't give Creed any opening he can exploit. And if he uses my mother against us, threatens to hurt her if we don't comply, then we call his bluff. Corwin's jaw set. Creed is a coward beneath the cruelty. He acts when he has power and retreats when challenged. If we show strength, he'll fold. Sonara wanted to believe him, but she'd seen Creed's eyes when he'd grabbed her hair, felt the genuine pleasure he took in her fear. This wasn't a man who folded. This was a man who escalated. "I'll go," she finally said. "But you stay close, hidden if possible. If something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong." "If something goes wrong," she repeated firmly, "you need to be able to get me out. Promise me." He hesitated, then nodded. "I promise." They departed at dawn, taking a small carriage with 4 armed footmen riding alongside. Corwin rode inside with her, his hand wrapped around hers, both of them silent with the weight of what was coming. The journey took most of the day. As they approached her family's village, Sonara watched the familiar landmarks pass with mounting dread. The old mill, the church steeple, the crossroads where she'd walked as a child, never imagining she'd return as a woman fleeing the man her father had sold her to. The cottage looked smaller than she remembered, shabby and sad, like something slowly dying. "I don't see Creed's carriage," Corwin murmured, scanning the area. "Perhaps he's already left. Or perhaps he's waiting inside." They stopped at the gate. Corwin helped her down, his touch lingering. "5 minutes," he said quietly. "If you're not out in 5 minutes, I'm coming in. Give me 10. I need to see my mother." He nodded reluctantly, and she walked up the path alone, her blood rushing loud in her ears. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open slowly, stepping into the dim interior. "Mother?" Silence. She moved through the parlor, up the narrow stairs, toward the bedroom her mother had occupied since her illness worsened. The door was open. A figure sat beside the bed, turned away from her. "Mother, I came as soon as—" The figure turned. It wasn't her mother. It was Lord Creed. "Miss Whitmore." His smile was triumph itself. "How good of you to join us." Behind him, on the bed, Lillian lay motionless. Sonara couldn't tell if she was sleeping. "What have you done to her?" "Nothing permanent. Yet." Creed rose smoothly. "Just a sedative to keep her quiet. She'll wake in a few hours, none the worse for wear, assuming you cooperate." "Corwin is outside. If I scream—" "If you scream, my men will kill him before he reaches the door." Creed's voice was pleasant, conversational. "There are 8 of them, hidden around the property. His 4 footmen won't be enough." The blood drained from her face. "I see you understand." He crossed toward her slowly. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave with me, quietly, through the back. You're going to tell the Duke nothing. And in exchange, your mother will be well cared for until she dies naturally, whenever that may be. And if I refuse, then your mother dies tonight. Your precious Duke dies trying to save you. And I take you anyway, though I'll be considerably less gentle about it." She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Every option led to destruction. "Tick-tock, Miss Whitmore." Creed's smile widened. "What's it going to be?" Outside, she heard Corwin's voice calling her name. Inside, her mother's shallow breathing was the only sound. And Sonara realized, with dawning horror, that there was no way out of this trap that didn't end in sacrifice. She went with him. There was no other choice. If she screamed, Corwin would die rushing to save her. If she refused, her mother would die in her bed. Creed had calculated every variable, and his math was flawless. So she wrote a note with trembling hands, while Creed watched with satisfaction. "Corwin, my mother needs me. I must stay here. Please go back to Wintermere. I'll send word when I can. Don't come looking for me. It's better this way." Every word was a lie, and every word cut like glass. They left through the back garden, through a gate she'd forgotten existed, into a waiting carriage hidden behind the old barn. Two of Creed's men materialized from the shadows, their faces blank, professional. "Bind her hands," Creed instructed as they settled into the carriage. "Gently. I don't want marks. Not yet." One of the men produced soft rope, wrapping it around her wrists with impersonal efficiency. Sonara didn't fight. Fighting would accomplish nothing except bruises and exhaustion. Instead, she watched, memorized the route they were taking, the features of Creed's men, any detail that might prove useful later. "You're being very cooperative," Creed observed, settling across from her. "I expected more resistance." What would resistance accomplish? Nothing. But most women in your position would try anyway, screaming, weeping, pleading. His eyes gleamed. "Your composure is intriguing. I'm saving my energy." "For what?" "For when it matters." He laughed, genuinely amused. "I do admire you, Miss Whitmore. So much fire, so much spirit. It's going to be a pleasure breaking you down. Others have tried. Others didn't have what I have." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Your father's debts are now mine. Your brother's future is in my hands. Your mother's medical care depends entirely on my continued generosity. Even your precious Duke can be destroyed, if I choose to pursue it." He spread his hands. "I own you, Sonara, completely. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." She said nothing, but behind her composure, her mind was racing. The carriage traveled for hours. When they finally stopped, twilight had faded to true darkness, and the building before them was nothing she recognized. A manor house, imposing and isolated, surrounded by grounds that disappeared into black forest. "Welcome to Ravensholt." Creed's voice held proprietary pride. "My country estate. Remote, private, impossible to find if you don't know where to look." He guided her out of the carriage, his grip bruising on her arm. "No one will hear you scream here, Miss Whitmore. Though I do hope you'll try, eventually." Inside, the house was decorated with oppressive grandeur. Dark wood, heavy curtains, paintings of hunts and battles that glorified violence, everything chosen to intimidate. Creed led her up a sweeping staircase, down a corridor lined with locked doors, to a room at the far end. "Your quarters. Until the wedding." "Wedding?" "Of course." He pushed open the door, revealing a bedroom that might have been lovely if not for the bars on the windows. "Did you think I'd waste all this effort on anything less than a permanent arrangement? We'll be married within the week. Special license, private ceremony, no interruptions. The Duke will find me." "The Duke received your note. By now he's convinced you left willingly, choosing your family over him. His pride won't let him pursue a woman who rejected him." Creed's smile was cruel. "I know his type. Nobility wrapped around deep insecurity. One blow to his ego, and he crumbles. You don't know him at all. I know he couldn't save his brother, couldn't save his cousin, couldn't even keep you safe despite all his resources and promises." Creed pushed her into the room, following close behind. "Wintermere is a failure, Miss Whitmore. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you'll stop hoping for rescue." He left, the door locking behind him with heavy finality. Sonara stood in the center of her prison, listening to his footsteps fade. Then she moved. The bars on the windows were solid but old. The door was thick oak, with no handle on the inside. The fireplace was too narrow to climb. She checked every corner, every piece of furniture, every possible avenue of escape. Nothing. She sank onto the bed, her bound hands aching, her mind churning with desperate calculations. Think. She had to think. Creed believed he'd won, believed his trap was perfect, his victory complete. But traps had weaknesses. Every cage had a flaw. She just had to find it. The next day brought a maid, silent and terrified, who untied her hands long enough for her to eat and wash. Sonara tried to speak to her, but the girl's eyes darted to the corner where a guard stood watching, and she shook her head imperceptibly. No allies among the staff then, or none who dared to help. Creed visited that evening, dressed for dinner, as if they were guests at a party, rather than jailer and prisoner. "I thought we might dine together," he said pleasantly. "Civilized conversation. A chance to become better acquainted before our wedding. I'm not hungry. You'll eat anyway. I need my bride healthy." His eyes traveled over her body with possessive satisfaction. Strong enough to bear children. Strong enough to withstand training. Nausea churned in her stomach. "The wedding is in 6 days," he continued. "I've already arranged the license, the clergyman, and the witnesses. When it's done, you'll legally be mine. No duke, no court, no law can touch you then. I'll refuse. I'll say no at the altar. The clergyman is in my debt. He'll record whatever I tell him to record." Creed moved closer, his breath warm against her cheek. "And after the ceremony, I'll have the wedding night I've been dreaming of. The one you denied me at your father's cottage." She refused to flinch, refused to give him the satisfaction. "Corwin will come." "Corwin?" Creed laughed. "You still believe that? Even now? Even after you told him to leave you alone?" He shook his head, almost pitying. "You poor, deluded girl. No one is coming for you. No one can. You belong to me now, body and soul. The sooner you accept that, the less painful this will be." He left her alone with the food she couldn't eat, and the despair she refused to feel. 6 days. She had 6 days to find a way out, or become Lord Creed's wife forever. Corwin didn't believe the note. He read it 3 times, standing in the Whitmore Cottage's shabby parlor, and knew immediately that something was wrong. The words were Sonara's, the handwriting close enough to pass cursory inspection. But the message was lies. She wouldn't leave. Not like this. Not after everything they'd confessed to each other. She wouldn't tell him to stop looking, wouldn't cut him off with cold finality, unless someone was forcing her. He found Lillian Whitmore still sedated in her bed, her breathing shallow but steady. A local physician was summoned, concluding she'd been given a significant dose of laudanum, likely against her will. Creed. The bastard had laid his trap perfectly. Drawn Sonara out with her mother's supposed emergency, then snatched her while Corwin waited outside like a fool. But Creed had made one mistake. He'd underestimated how far Corwin would go. Within hours, every resource at Wintermere was mobilized. Investigators, informants, men who moved in shadows and knew how to find things that wanted to stay hidden. Corwin offered rewards that could bankrupt minor nobility, promised favors that would reshape political landscapes. It took 4 agonizing days to find Ravensholt, 4 days of sleepless nights and grinding terror. 4 days of imagining what Creed might be doing to her while he searched. 4 days of his grandmother watching him with worried eyes, saying nothing because there was nothing to say. Finally, on the morning of the 5th day, his chief investigator arrived with a location and a rough map of the estate's layout. "Heavy guard," the man reported. 8 men minimum, possibly more. The house is isolated, no neighbors for miles. "Can we get in?" "With enough men, yes, but not quietly. If they see us coming, they'll have time to hurt her." Corwin's voice was flat. "Or kill her." "Yes, Your Grace." He stared at the map, calculating. A frontal assault was too risky. Creed would use Sonara as a shield the moment he realized rescue had arrived. But there might be another way. This window. He pointed to a small rectangle on the map's upper floor. "It's barred, you said?" "Heavily barred. No chance of getting her out that way. But someone could get in. Someone small, quiet, who could unlock the door from the inside. The investigator's eyes widened. You're not suggesting. I'm suggesting exactly that. Corwin straightened. Creed knows I'll come with men and weapons. He's prepared for a siege. He's not prepared for one man climbing through a window in the middle of the night. Your Grace, the risk is mine to take. He rolled up the map. Get me someone who can teach me to climb. We leave at nightfall. The night of the rescue was moonless and cold. Corwin moved through the darkness with skills he'd spent a day learning and a lifetime finding reason to use. The walls of Ravensholt were old stone, weathered and cracked, providing handholds that a desperate man could exploit. He climbed. His fingers bled. His muscles screamed. Twice he nearly fell, catching himself through pure will. But he climbed. The window he'd targeted wasn't Sonara's room. It was a storage space, unguarded, unbarred, forgotten. He slipped through the narrow opening and landed silently on dusty floorboards. The house was quiet. Creed's guards patrolled the grounds, watching for approaching forces, not intruders already inside. Corwin moved through the corridors like a ghost. The map's layout burned into his memory. Third door on the left. End of the hall. He found it. The lock was heavy, requiring a key he didn't have. But he'd come prepared. A set of picks, acquired from men who didn't ask questions, worked silently in his hands. The lock clicked open. He pushed the door slowly, praying she was there, praying she was alive, and praying Creed hadn't. She was standing by the window, her back to him, her hands pressed against the bars. Sonara. She spun, and the expression on her face, terror transforming to disbelief, transforming to desperate hope, was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Corwin. His name came out broken. You came. You actually came. I will always come for you. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. Always. She clung to him, shaking, and he felt the wetness of tears against his shirt. The note was a lie, she whispered. He made me write it. I didn't want to leave you. I never wanted. I know. He pulled back, cupping her face, drinking in the sight of her. Bruises shadowed her wrists where bindings had been. Dark circles ringed her eyes. But she was alive. She was whole. I knew the moment I read it. How did you find me? I would have torn England apart stone by stone. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, and her lips. But thankfully, it only took 5 days. Creed, his guards, are about to receive a distraction. As if on cue, shouts erupted from the grounds below. My men, come. We have to move. He took her hand, and together they ran. They didn't make it to the window. Creed appeared at the end of the corridor, flanked by 2 guards, his face contorted with fury that stripped away every pretense of civilization. Going somewhere, Your Grace? Corwin pushed Sonara behind him, positioning himself between her and the threat. This is over, Creed. My men are on your grounds. More are coming. Surrender now, and I'll see you face justice rather than a hangman's noose. Justice? Creed laughed, high and ugly. From a man who couldn't save his own brother? From a duke playing at heroism to soothe his pathetic guilt? He drew a pistol from his coat. I don't think so. If you shoot me, my men will kill you. Perhaps. But you'll be dead, and I'll have the satisfaction of knowing you failed again. The pistol leveled at Corwin's chest. Just like you failed Marcus. Just like you failed Morvenna. Just like you're about to fail her. Sonara's hand tightened on Corwin's arm. Then she stepped out from behind him. Wait. Sonara, don't. No. Her voice was calm, controlled, utterly unlike a woman facing a man with a gun. Lord Creed, you want me, That's what this has always been about. Not the contracts, not my father's debts. Me. Creed's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? Making a deal. She moved forward slowly, her hands raised. Let him go. Let him walk out of here unharmed, and I'll stay. Willingly. No more fighting. No more resistance. Sonara, no! Corwin's voice cracked. I mean it. She kept walking, closer to Creed, further from safety. Think about it. You've wanted a willing wife, not a prisoner. Someone who would choose you. I'm offering that. A true marriage. A real partnership. Just let him go. For a moment, greed warred with suspicion in Creed's expression. You're lying. Test me. She stopped an arm's length away. Kill him, and I'll fight you until my last breath. Spend the rest of our marriage breaking me down piece by piece. Or accept my offer, and have everything you wanted. The pistol wavered. In that moment of hesitation, Sonara moved. She didn't try to grab the gun, didn't try to fight. Instead, she dropped, hitting the floor as Corwin surged forward with a roar. The pistol discharged. Plaster exploded from the ceiling. Corwin's fist connected with Creed's jaw, sending him staggering backward. The guards moved to intervene, but shouts from below announced the arrival of Corwin's men. The fight was brief and brutal. Creed, for all his cruelty, had no experience with physical violence. He relied on others to do his dirty work. Against a man fueled by fury and love and 2 years of grief, he crumbled. Corwin had him pinned to the ground within moments, knee on his chest, hands around his throat. You're done. Corwin's voice was barely human. You killed my brother. You killed my cousin. You tried to take the woman I love. It ends here. Corwin. Sonara's hand touched his shoulder. Don't. He deserves to die. Yes, but not by your hands. Not like this. She knelt beside him, her voice gentle. Don't become what he is. Don't let him take that from you, too. The fury in Corwin's eyes warred with something else, something human. His hands loosened. He stood, backing away from Creed's gasping form, his whole body trembling with restrained violence. Take him, he ordered his men, who had flooded the corridor. Lock him somewhere secure. He faces trial for murder, abduction, and every other crime we can prove. Creed was hauled to his feet, his handsome face bloody and swollen. But even now, even defeated, malice gleamed in his eyes. This isn't over, Wintermere. You can't prove anything. My lawyers? Your lawyers can't help you. A new voice cut through the chaos. Lady Thessaly swept into the corridor, magnificent in traveling clothes, flanked by men in official uniforms. Grandmother. Corwin stared. What are you doing here? Cleaning up your mess, as usual. But her eyes were warm, proud. I brought the magistrate, and something else. She held up a leather satchel. Documents. Marcus's documents. The ones you thought burned. The color drained from Creed's face. How? Marcus wasn't a fool. The dowager's voice was steel. He made copies. Sent them to me for safekeeping. I only found them last month, hidden in a correspondence box I hadn't opened in years. She turned to the magistrate. Everything you need to convict this man of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit murder. I trust that will be sufficient. More than sufficient, Your Grace, Creed screamed as they dragged him away, threats and promises dissolving into incoherent rage. And then, finally, it was over. Sonara sagged against Corwin, her strength finally failing. He caught her, held her, and pressed his face into her hair. It's done, he breathed. You're safe. He can't hurt you anymore. He can't hurt anyone anymore. She pulled back to look at him, at the blood on his knuckles, the tears on his cheeks, the love blazing in his eyes. You came for me. I told you. Always. She kissed him then, there in the corridor of her former prison, surrounded by evidence of violence and victory. Kissed him with everything she had, every fear and hope and dream she'd been afraid to feel. When they finally broke apart, Lady Thessaly was watching with an expression that might almost have been approval. "Well," she said dryly, "I suppose you've earned each other, though I expect a proper courtship before any wedding announcements. The scandal is quite enough without adding unseemly haste." Corwin laughed, a sound of pure release. "Yes, grandmother. And you." The dowager turned to Zanara. "You talked him down, kept him from becoming a murderer." "Aye, don't argue." "I saw it." Her stern features softened. "Perhaps you're worthy of him after all." It wasn't quite acceptance, but it was a beginning. 6 months later, the wedding was small by ducal standards, intimate by any measure. Just family and close friends gathered in Wintermere's chapel, sunlight streaming through ancient windows, casting colors across the stone floor. Sonara walked the aisle alone, not because she had no one to escort her, but because she chose it that way. She'd been given away once, by a father who saw her as currency. This time, she would give herself. Corwin waited at the altar, his dark hair slightly disheveled, his eyes bright with emotion he no longer tried to hide. When she reached him, he took her hands. "You look beautiful," he murmured. "You look terrified." "Absolutely." His smile was radiant. "I'm about to marry the most remarkable woman in England. Terror seems appropriate." The ceremony was traditional, the vows ancient and simple. But when Corwin slipped the ring onto her finger, when the clergyman pronounced them wed, the kiss that followed was anything but traditional. The guests applauded. Bryony wept openly. Lady Thessaly dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief while pretending she wasn't crying at all. And in the front row, supported by a nurse and wrapped in warm blankets, Lillian Whitmore smiled. She'd recovered enough to travel, though the physicians warned against too much exertion. But nothing could have kept her from watching her daughter marry the man who'd saved her life. Afterward, at the wedding breakfast, Sonara found a quiet moment with her mother. "I'm proud of you," Lillian whispered. "So proud. Your father. Father made his choices." Sonara kept her voice gentle. Aldous Whitmore had been arrested alongside Creed, charged with conspiracy and fraud. His testimony, given in exchange for leniency, had helped seal Creed's fate. He was currently awaiting trial, a broken man who would never trouble them again. "We make ours. And your choice is him." Lillian looked toward Corwin, who was engaged in animated conversation with his grandmother. "He's a good man, isn't he? The best I've ever known. Then hold on to him." Lillian squeezed her daughter's hand. "Good men are rare. Love that survives, fire is rarer still." That evening, as the guests departed and Wintermere settled into peaceful quiet, Corwin led Sonara to the portrait gallery. A new painting hung beside Morvena's, a woman with dark hair and fierce eyes, wearing dove-gray silk, captured in a moment of unguarded joy. "When did you—" "I commissioned it months ago." Corwin stood behind her, arms wrapped around her waist. "From a sketch I had made while you weren't looking. I wanted you here, Sonara. Part of the family, part of the house, part of everything. You were very confident I'd say yes. I was terrified you'd say no." He turned her to face him. "Every day since you agreed to stay, I've expected you to realize you could do better. Find someone without ghosts. Someone who doesn't wake screaming from nightmares about fire and loss. I have nightmares too." She cupped his face. "About locked doors and men who see women as property. But we don't face them alone anymore. That's the difference." He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I have something else for you." He produced a letter from his coat. "It arrived this morning." She opened it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the signature made her heart stop. Jonathan, her brother. Writing from Italy, where he'd fled after Creed's arrest, ashamed of his role in introducing their father to Creed's circle. The letter was long, rambling, full of apologies and explanations and tentative hope for reconciliation. I never knew what Father planned. I swear it. If I had known, I would have stopped it. Please believe me. Please forgive me. Will you? Corwin asked quietly. Forgive him? Sonara considered the words, the brother she'd loved, the mistakes they'd both made. Eventually. She folded the letter carefully. Not today, but eventually. That seems fair. They walked together through the gallery, past portraits of Ashworth's stretching back centuries, past Morvena's gentle smile, past the new painting that showed Sonara not as she had been, but as she'd become. A duchess, a survivor, a woman who'd walked through fire and emerged unbroken. They ended at the window overlooking the grounds, where the last light of sunset painted everything gold. Do you remember, Corwin said softly, the first time I saw you? At my father's cottage, when Creed had me cornered. No, before that. He smiled at her confusion. In the garden. 2 days before I approached the house. I was watching, gathering information, and you came outside to check the gate. You stood there in the fading light, and you looked up at the sky like you were praying for escape. You were the figure I saw, in the shadows. I was the figure you saw. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. And I knew, even then, that I was going to save you. I just didn't know that saving you would mean finding myself. She leaned into him, watching the sunset together, feeling his heartbeat steady against her back. What happens now? She asked. Now. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Now we live. Not perfectly, not without struggle, but together. Always together. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Fairy tales ended with weddings, and assumed happiness followed automatically. This was something better. This was a beginning built on fire and loss, and the stubborn insistence that love was worth every risk. A beginning that felt, finally, like home.